Let's see, what do we got at the bookstore today? Manga, comics, that's nice. Health, well, that's good, gotta stay healthy. Sports.
Here's your chance, do your dance at the Space Jam.
H.P. Lovecraft was a funny guy. Merely regarded as just another pulp writer during his time, he has since become one of the most prolific figures of the horror genre for his incredible way of tapping into the most deep-seated fears of the human mind, such as the infinite unknown, great expanses of time, as well as some less relatable ones like people from different countries and their conditioning. The aesthetics and ideas of his work would be adopted by many forms of media throughout the decades, with varying levels of sincerity, and they ended up as the face of one of the more interesting approaches to archetype design seen in Yu-Gi-Oh! The Entity archetype is one of the very rare Korean OCG exclusives, featuring no main deck monsters and a very fittingly strange lineup of extra deck ones. Funny thing is, the other Korean exclusive archetype was also based on freaky water creatures, and no wonder this man was so scared of aquatic life. Look at these things. Well, that, and he constantly looked like he had a frog in his bottom lip. Making history for Archetype Archive, we start off with not just an extra deck monster, but a banned card as well. Elder Entity Norden is a level 4 fusion monster, a water fairy with 2000 attack and 2200 defense, requires a fusion of 2 synchro or Xyz monsters and has the effect: when this card is special summoned, you can target one level 4 or lower monster in your graveyard, special summon it, but its effects are negated, also banish it when this card leaves the field. So this is a pretty unconventional start to the archetype as far as Lovecraft theming goes. The two Elder entities are based around benevolent but rare figures from the mythos, Norden being inspired by Nodens, which in turn was adapted from a Celtic deity of many things, but also the sea. I mean, I'm not complaining, his appearance is awesome and takes after his depiction in The Strange High House in the Mist, but this would also be like making a Tolkien archetype and leading with Farmer Maggot. And while the summoning condition is fittingly weird too, the effect is a stark contrast. In the combo that facilitated some of the most widespread playstyles in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, you pop open an instant fusion, Norden comes out because he basically lived in there, and you get easy access to your entire rank 4 toolbox. And despite this exact interaction being employed by every deck under the sun for several years, the straw that broke the camel's back somehow ended up being Zodiac summoning the card legitimately with fusion substitute. And so Norden is banned in both formats to this day, where he will surely stay for a long time, not because of balance or anything, but to tie together the sheer cosmic incomprehensibleness. The second Elder entity and the archetype's other fusion monster is It's a level 4 light fairy with 2500 attack and 1200 defense, requires specifically fusing a synchro monster with an Xyz monster, and must be special summoned from your extra deck by sending the above cards you control to the graveyard. Once per turn, you can special summon one level 4 monster from your hand. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target one card on the field, destroy it. You can only special summon Elder Entity Nithis once per turn. You could technically spend your instant fusion on this, but if your level 4s don't already have a way of swarming from the hand without it, it might already be too late. Instead, the card became a staple in any deck that can dump monsters from the extra deck to the graveyard as cost, making up for it with some easy spot removal. The playstyle of the actual entity archetype should be a bit more evident now, focusing on cycling between different types of extra deck monsters while enabling the next wave to come along. Well, at least it used to be before all their best cards got banned. Nithis is also by far the deck's most obscure inclusion lore-wise, being named after Nutsa Campbell, a warrior deity originating from a short story by Gary Myers, a guy who's still alive and shares a name with somebody who just published a book about the New York Giants. Are they also Eldritch Abominations? Am I gonna have to fit UA in this video?
Football time!
Moving on to some imagery much closer to what you'd expect from this theming, we have their first synchro monster, Old Entity Cthugua. It's a level 4 Fire Pyro with 2200 attack and 200 defense, a generic summoning condition, and if this card is synchro summoned, you can return all rank 4 Xyz monsters on the field to the extra deck. If you fusion summon using this card as fusion material, draw one card. An Xyz monster that was summoned using this card on the field as Xyz material gains this effect. If it is Xyz summoned, draw one card. Anything that tells rank 4s to fuck off is good in my book, and the rekindling defense stat as well as a draw power and extension is also appreciated, but sadly none of this was enough to make the card see any real play. I guess you could do something funny and summon this with Melfi's, although the locals might start getting real concerned when the Lovecraft player pulls out a cat in the middle of the duel. Another weird thing is that we're also still not quite there in terms of relevant mythos, as this is not actually Cthulhu as a Zernius would expect. Instead it's Cthugha, a demonic elemental of fire created by August Derleth, whose contributions to the canon are controversial to say the least, implied in a short story to be one of the only things feared by Nyarlathotep. I like to imagine that portraying this small detail was the intention behind the rank 4 bounce effect, as Nyarla is actually a rank 4 in the archetype. Very cool stuff. Card is still bad. The other level 4 synchro in the archetype is the much more famous old entity Hastor. It's a wind reptile with 2300 attack and 1000 defense, again a generic summoning condition, and the effect: if this card is sent from the monster zone to the graveyard, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls, equip this card from your graveyard to that monster. That monster cannot attack, also its effects are negated. If this card leaves the field while equipped to an opponent's monster by this effect, take control of the monster this card was equipped to. Well, I said the entity is more famous, everybody and their mother knows the King in Yellow, but the card itself is definitely not a hit nowadays. I like the shtick here of taking over the mind of a monster until it abides by your command, and the card was pretty decent at the time of release, but the effect is just a bit too slow nowadays and requires too much setup to properly pull off. Level 4 synchros are a weird lineup of monsters which usually aren't something you commit to even in a dedicated spam deck, so this never quite ended up joining the ranks of Armory Arm and Herald of the Arclight. Now, can this deck please get some more cards with deities that were actually made by Lovecraft? What are we doing here? Oh god! Okay, yep, that's definitely Lovecraftian. Man, what if the guy had been named something different? Like, just imagine yourself referring to this as Richardian or Patrician. This complete fucking gorgeous freak is Outer Entity Nyarla, a generic rank 4 Earth Fiend with 0 attack and 2600 defense, and when this card is Xyz summoned, you can discard any number of cards, increase this card's rank by the number of discarded cards. Once per turn, while this card has Xyz material, you can target one monster in your graveyard, detach all materials from this card, and if you do, attach that target to this card as material. When a monster is attached by this effect, this card's type and attribute become the same as that monster's original type and attribute. Fitting for a prominent creation of the mythos, the crawling chaos of 1,000 faces, Nyarla can freely change any of its stats with a bit of setup. The downside of this is that it's an Xyz monster, possibly the least versatile type of card when it comes to being used as extra deck material, outside of things like rank up magics. We'll get to those in a minute. In any other case, Nyarla is a niche setup tool for a couple of DKs and not much else, which is not great, but a supreme eldritch entity only being seen in your last moments of consciousness is pretty adequate, so I guess I can't complain. To make another comment on the artwork, because it really is one of the most eye-catching cards in the game. This is well drawn and appropriately freaky, but what I find really cool is how distinctly simple it is while still being very monstrous. I'm saying this specifically because Nyarlathotep is a deity with a more distinct earthly presence in the stories, even down to being an earth monster, so it would make sense that the form it's depicted in is not as much of a cascading monstrosity the way Cthulhu is, or their final monster for that matter. Outer Entity Azathoth is a rank 5 Dark Fiend with 2300 attack, 0 defense, requires 3 level 5 monsters, and you can also Xyz summon this card by using an Outer Entity Xyz monster you control as material. Transfer its materials to this card. Cannot be used as material for an Xyz summon. After this card was Xyz summoned, your opponent cannot activate monster effects for the rest of that turn. Cannot be used as material for an Xyz summon. If this card has at least 3 Xyz materials, 1 fusion, 1 synchro, and 1 Xyz monster, cannot be used as material for an Xyz summon. You can detach one material from this card, destroy all cards your opponent controls. Wow, so this is the power of the blind idiot god. Just imagine what he could do if he was sighted and smart. Azathoth is a weird card, coming from a similar school of design as Utopia the Lightning. If you can expend a piece of extra deck space, any 2 level 4s can turn into a monster that completely circumvents a problem you might be facing, and in this case, Azathoth entirely shuts down field effects and most hand traps, or baits them out at the very least, so you can keep making your plays as summoning the monster itself did not take away too many resources. That is what happens on your turn. However, you add this handy little quick play rank up magic that doesn't even belong to the archetype onto a Nyarla with dark attribute applied, and you have easy access to total monster shutdown on the opponent's turn. It's almost like there was some precedent for 2 level 4s in a rank up magic, resulting in the most obnoxious lockdown imaginable. At least Azathoth is more aesthetically appealing. The field nuke effect is not something you'd ever pull off without extensive setup, which was the intention behind the archetype, but they simply did not have enough synergy and support to make this their win condition. And well, the card is banned, so even if you did have some insane combo in mind to turbo this thing out, it won't apply anywhere outside of house rules. Cannot be used as material for an Xyz summon. Once again though, the artwork is great. I like the way we only see a fraction of Azathoth, as it seems to be hanging off of something larger in the sky, like some kind of demonic hot air balloon. I enjoy how the entity monsters have a variety of designs and rendering styles. Some of them look like standard Yu-Gi-Oh fare, and others kinda resemble RPG monster manual art. I know some people would prefer more consistency, but I think it adds to the unique and strange vibe of the deck. For the rather small back row, we have 2 spells and a trap, starting with Forbidden Trapezohedron. It's a normal spell with the following effect. If you control exactly 2 monster card types among Fusion, Synchro, and/or Xyz, apply the following effect based on those types. Fusion and Synchro, special summon 1 Outer Entity Xyz monster from your extra deck, and if you do, attach attach this card to it as material. Synchro and Xyz, special summon one Elder Entity Fusion monster from your extra deck, and Xyz Infusion, special summon one Old Entity Synchro monster from your extra deck. You can only activate one Forbidden Trapezohedron per turn. The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the deck builder to correlate all of their extra deck's contents, which I imagine was the thought process behind this card, as it's kind of a shortcut to the rest of your entities because they knew you were not gonna be putting all of them out in one turn. This is an odd card because while it is semi-generic and you do get
Oh no!
a free extra deck monster if you have some variety on your field, having a deck capable of building that kind of board in the first place usually means you don't really need entities to empower it. Maybe if the good ones were still around, but until then there's nothing really interesting to summon from beyond the cosmos. After that we have the field spell Dreamland. Well, Kirby is not really a stranger to fighting things that look like this, so it's not really out of place. This card can activate these effects depending on the monster card types on the field. Fusion. Once per turn, if a monster is set from your hand or field to the graveyard by a card effect, except during the damage step, you can draw one card. Synchro. When a monster is normal or special summoned except during the damage step, you can increase their levels by 1, and Xyz, once per turn during your end phase, destroy the monster on the field with the highest level. You can only activate one Dreamland per turn. I know they're referring to one of Lovecraft's story settings, but I think a more fitting title for this card would be Cross Sheet Hope. These are such weird effects. The first one gives you a small bit of extension upon a proper fusion summon or as compensation for effect removal. The second one could help you get to higher level synchros faster or theoretically stun the opponent if they're aiming for level reliant extra deck plays, seeing how it's not once per turn. And the Xyz one is like an extremely lame version of Chicken Game where both players are simply trying not to have a monster with a level on the field at the end of the turn. And none of this is worth the effort. Let these lands stay a dream. These lands dream. And finally we have the normal trap card, Forbidden Apocrypha. Declare one monster card type, Fusion, Synchro or Xyz. If two or more monsters of the declared type are on the field, make each player send all monsters of that type from their field to the graveyard. Okay, it's not quite intended to extend entity combos or anything, but it plays into the archetype thematically and it used to be a neat alternative to D-Barrier. That said, you should still run D-Barrier and not this for obvious reasons. Pretty sure if you read the actual Necronomicon, there will be a rhyming couplet somewhere in there that says something like, "That is unaffected," which the text doesn't name drop, and with strange effects even links may pop. Grading is not really possible here. The archetype barely had enough gas in the tank to be played as a coherent deck even before the big two got banned, so it's hardly a valid subject for critique the way more realized archetypes are. Same goes for a deck list. We don't live in a world where Norden and Azathoth are free to use in any deck you can imagine, so it would be a pointless endeavor to try making one even without the ban list in mind. So let's simply head on to the closer, I guess. I don't know what Lovecraft's big deal was. These horrors are actually quite comprehensible to me. There was an interesting attempt here to form an unconventional synergy between a bunch of cards that don't do much to help each other get summoned, but have interesting interactions once they're on the field, and some of them are especially cool in terms of theming. This is not Yu-Gi-Oh's only foray into the mythos. The rather esoteric Tindangles are based on the story of the Hounds of Tindalos, and their effects are also appropriately weird, but entities are much more entwined with the grander lore and aesthetic of the setting, so it feels like a waste that not much was done with the concept. Where are the main deck cultists and survivors? Where's more background based on obscure Lovecraft stories? Where am I? Where the hell are Yogg-Sothoth and Cthulhu? If he still waits dreaming in his house at Trilliac, somebody needs to go wake him up and turn him into a Link 4. But looking at the rest of the deck, I think it's a safe conclusion that not all things which slumber should be awakened. And then I went to the fish market and I went insane at the fish market. Goodbye.
Alright, admittedly I've always wanted to try this. So, I've got these candles, I've got this book, I've got these bones, and, well, we're gonna try calling forth an entity from the outer darkness, you know, something all the kids are doing these days. So all we have to do is lay all the candles out like this, and hold the book open like this. We're gonna have it on this page with like a little picture of the man, and we just have to say these words: Sklepto Raholi Shinalbo. I don't speak Spanish, so this is a little hard for me. And then, yeah, any second now. So, oh, hey, there we go. Alright, and now it's time. Hey, what are you looking at? There's nothing over there. Hey, we're supposed to. Where are you going? We're supposed to have a punchline. This one was finally supposed to kill me. Oh, come on. Oh man, looks like your graphics card is having problems.